I guess we'll turn it over to you then.
All right. All right. Thanks, David. My name is Al Carnetz with the Vermont Land Trust, and my role is I do the farmland conservation projects in the Champlain Valley. Thank you for having me back. Not that long ago, Tracy Shao, our president, and I were here. So at this point, though, we wanted to really advocate and push, like we did last time, for the Vermont Housing Conservation Board support. This is our coalition day, as you probably know. But we really wanted to hear from people that we've worked with. Literally, the stories of our conservation work are here today, and I think they'll tell a pretty compelling story. I think to talk about you asked about the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. They are the primary funders, really, of our farmland conservation work and of conservation work around Vermont. So my role is to bring projects to them. I work with the landowners. We have several other staff. Donald Campbell is another one. And Rebecca works at a different level at Vermont Land Trust. So there's a few of our staff members here, but we bring projects to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. Usually it's a quarterly cycle of projects, and they issue the grants to the Vermont Land Trust. We do the legwork. We're the boots on the ground folks to bring a projects to them, and then they'll select which projects move forward. So, the governor has allocated in his budget 36 point something million, and that's his recommendation. We urge you to support that. We feel that's an amount that will work for us, because a lot of these projects take a couple of years to complete. So the people that you'll hear from today, typically 2 or 3 years of getting to VHCB, to where we submit the grant requests. So that's primarily our roles, is literally the boots on the ground with the landowners and with the farmers. So, I mean, with that, I know that you've had great support with VHCB over the years, and we just thank you for that continued support. So I'll leave it at that, and I will let others introduce themselves as they come along. But we have 4 people that we'd like to talk, and please ask questions if you have them. And Donald and I are here, others are here. So first, Becca, I'll let you introduce yourself. And
We got a question.
Yes.
Just to clarify a bit. So if you identify, say, a farm for conservation, sometimes, and you need some funding in order to meet that designation. Sometimes you would go to VHCB and be co-partners, or sometimes you would just use Vermont Land Trust funds.
Yeah, fair question. For our purposes, VHCB really is the only shop in town for that farmland. We do have some other nonprofits, some foundations that can support us, but rarely do we fund a project specifically with other funding. Vermont Land Trust doesn't have funding ourselves to do these projects. We're always seeking other funding sources.
Okay.
And VHCB really is the source, for sure. Yep, and you'll hear more from Becca and others. So I will just sit over here and let you take center stage. All right.
Hi, my name is Becca Knaus. I'm the owner of the Goat Project, a small goat dairy in Bennington. We have about 20 goats, and I use their milk at the moment to make soap and also sell raw milk. We are currently in the process of building a creamery to expand into cheese, which is a large part due to the support of VHCB. I sit before you today because of the incredible impact VHCB and their programs have had on my farming career, specifically the Intervale Center and the Farm and Forest Viability Program. To give you a little background, I had many years of farming under my belt when I bought my first goats, so I was pretty accustomed to the farming side of things. However, it was the business part, the accounting, the profit and loss statements, minding expenses and income that was the steepest learning curve for me. This is where VHCB has been a game changer. When I started working with Sarah Armstrong Dunnigan through the Intervale Center, my expenses decreased and my income increased as I learned how to use QuickBooks and spreadsheets and keep an eye on what money was coming in and what was going out. With the Farm and Forest Viability Program, Sarah and I worked together to research and develop an extensive business plan, mapping out this expansion into cheese and what that could look like, which has been something I've been working towards for a very long time. Not only did the Farm Viability Program help me create a business plan, I was awarded an equipment grant through VHCB to upgrade my milking system from milking by hand to milking with machines. With this equipment, I was also able to qualify for a line of credit through the Vermont Community Loan Fund by using it as collateral. VHCB's impact in my farming career doesn't stop there. Last fall, we were able to conserve our farm with Vermont Land Trust, which has been a key financially to moving forward with building the creamery and expanding my farm. There's also a lot of value and meaning as a farmer, knowing that this land will be affordable for the next generation. I hope that it is clear how vital VHCB and their programs have been as I develop my farm business. To say that I'm incredibly grateful to VHCB's support as a farmer feels like an understatement. I've chosen a career that has many obstacles such as slim margins, funding availability, and weather, not to mention the strain on my body and mind, making this network of VHCB's support invaluable. VHCB has been my lifeline in building my dream as a farmer and providing food for my community. With that, I want to thank you for your ongoing support of VHCB. This year, we're asking the legislature to fund VHCB at its full statutory share, as supported by the governor's budget. This feels especially important to me right now as our federal supported programs are becoming more uncertain. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Becca.
Yeah.
Questions from committee?
Yes.
Jennifer, yeah.
Right now, we have 6 that are bred. And then in 2030, we have it mapped out so that we'll be milking 45. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you get to that stage, do you anticipate selling all of it directly from the farm as raw milk or?
No, we're making the bulk of it into cheese. And,
Cheese, okay.
and some of it will be used for soap.
You're a customer. Just up the
I'm a
road.
future customer.
Yeah.
I think I actually have bought some of the soap.
Yeah, Clearbrook, big supporter. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for making the drive up. I know it's a long drive. I do most of that drive every week. So appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
We go to Orwell. Mike, Gene, you should sit up with Mike. Mike and Gene.
I'm not on the agenda, but.
That's okay.
She's the fill in the blanks. I'm Mike Audette from Orwell, and this is my wife, Jean. She's been my right-hand man at the farm, so I could enjoy some of the boards that I had belonged to. I have to give her credit for a lot of things. My brother and I, Tom, enjoyed our farm for 50 years. We shared the farm and equipment and growing with my father and brother that were next door to us. We expanded and worked with Alan, probably 30 years. We enjoy the soil, we enjoy the farm, we enjoyed the work. Maybe we made a mistake. We educated our children and they all became interested in having their own businesses and teaching or whatever else. So they did well. We sold the farm to John Lucas. We didn't sell it to him first thing. We rented it to him for 6 years to help him gain funds and grow the herd so that it had enough herd that to make damn sure that he could make his payments. He's done well, and especially coming to where he's come, the soil is clay soil, and that can be real nice soil or it can be clay for pottery. So you have to get used to it real quick, and he's done it well. The farm has a nice site of the Lake Champlain and East Creek. And it has Mount Dependence on the end of the road, probably 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the farm. My brother and I decided years ago that when it came time to shed the farm, we wanted to conserve. And in conserving, we have enjoyed many things, all the little pieces that come with raising kids and everything else. Mount Independence is, I don't know how many acres up there, but it has about 5,000 people that visit I'm trying to think,
The museum
the museum
and walk the trails.
and walk the trails. The trails probably add quite a number to it. So we have a public that drives by and sees the farm and sees the quality of and the looks of the farm that helps sell milk. Lake Champlain is right there, travel by. There's 3 boat marinas down there. Also gives the opportunity for the public to see what is going on with the money that they've put into these accounts that help us buy or enjoy what Alan does. John Lucas, a young guy, he's doing well with the farm. He's grown and farmed with more cattle, does a good job in crops. And there's another benefit for the communities that go down the road. Through the last 30 years, we decided years ago that we would not graze the shorelines anymore. They had been grazed for years and years. The banks were sliding into the creek, and we left it be. Brush has come along, and it's done well. But so has it done well for those who want to hunt, the deer hunters, the turkey hunters. There's even a bear that's been around that we normally have never seen. But growing up, I never saw a deer in that vicinity. It was always grazed to nothing. So the public gets to enjoy the hunting. Hunting, it could be as many, we're not going to exaggerate, maybe 40 deer at a time down there. And it's not uncommon to see 50 deer down there, but crops have changed, corns have changed, and soybean has changed. So it draws these individuals and projects of hunting. So the public gains other than just seeing the dust when we put crops in. The other thing is, with Mount Independence just up the road, people hike and go all the way to Hubbardton. And there's, as long as I can remember, there's been a monument on the side of the road, and it sort of told you the trail was there. There's been a father and a young son who have picked away as we've plowed, wheel harrowed, and whatever else. They have found grape shot. They have found arrowheads. But the interesting thing is, where my wife and I are, they kept picking, and there's a big old stump for that they went round and round and found a rifle from what period, what year?
Well, it was the Revolutionary War period, so they
And
got dropped there as they were exiting Mount Independence to Hubbardton.
but the interesting thing is, there was a button with it. And a button was taken over to Fort Ticonderoga because they think they know everything. And this kid and an individual that you have done Civil War reenacting with proved that this and the rifle that was found showed that there was a group of soldiers that came over from Ticonderoga and just proved that we were right and they weren't. So there's a lot of things that in conserving this land, the public gets it in a different way than just milking cows and seeing the cows and everything else. It's money well spent for you people. It goes in a lot of different ways, but the public hikes it and the public enjoys seeing the whole works. Yeah, so go ahead.
No,
You can. We have a sugar house, just so you people know, that sugar house plays an important part. We haven't got a big one, but it's good for about, maybe, I don't know, 500-600 taps. And then the public brings in their side. It's good for you people because visit sugar houses because there's pre and there's post-town meeting. And boy, we can all catch on one way or the other. So place smart.
A lot of politics in
Yeah.
the sugar house.
But that's it. I enjoyed the farm, my brother and I, and we've enjoyed the years, difficulties, and it's done well. So, and I'm hoping that John Lucas will do equally as well.
Now, are you still living on the farm?
My wife and I live just a mile or two from the farm, and we have sheep.
It's not a dirty word here.
So, I guess just after you farm forever, you just can't go home. So we have sheep. So, and they're meat breed. So it's good. It gives us something to do. And then we have horses. Why horses? When we have one wife to ride them, it's interesting. So,
To answer your question, actually, Mike's brother still lives and is renting the farmhouse from John Lucas, and it will be building another house, and the sugar house we kept, which is about 30 acres. Because we just thought we might want to be doing sugaring for a while. And we also thought maybe the brother Tom might build his house there, but he decided to build it elsewhere.
we need social as we get older. So the sugar house is a good place. It can be a man cave. He could use it.
What's in the just a little bit as the layout, because you probably are unfamiliar with the area. So it has an incredible view of Lake Champlain and a lot of fields as you're going towards Mount Independence. And we never wanted to see it divided up into housing. It just is a pristine area. So Mike and Tom were very committed to the land trust and making that deal when we were selling the property to John Lucas. We didn't want to sell it unless the land trust was involved, because we didn't want him to buy it and then develop it, you know. You don't know.
Alan, did you have a?
No, I just wanted to recognize Mike, and speak to this, Mike, if you want. I want to recognize your early service with the VHCB, and you were on one of the early committees of helping us select farm projects.
Yeah.
I mean, when VHCB first kicked off 35, 40 years ago, and I've been at this about 30 years, but there was a huge interest. I mean, we still have a big interest, but there was almost a glut of projects, and you were sitting on that committee, Mike, to help us decide which one should we go with.
The advisory
Yeah,
board.
the advisory, and it's nice to drive around and see that they aren't being built with all these new houses. It's nice. It's been a good job that these people have done. That we want to say forever, but I think they worked their tails off. They worked their tails off.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, Gene, really, quite a story. So I have a couple of questions. First one has to do with the, loyalty of the button holder. Was he a Brit or was he a colonist? Well,
I think, where did he end up with the button? Did he bring it to Humberton?
They haven't.
so
So
what, my question is, was he a British soldier?
Oh.
Or
it was a British one. I mean, Fort Ticonderoga insisted that this British soldier never stepped on Vermont land. And we had the button to prove it.
Oh.
It was very exciting.
Thank you for that
But
clarification.
they came across the lake, not boat. They came across on the first bridge on Lake Champlain. So you can tell they didn't want to get wet. They just came right over there, thought they were going to push their way around, but
How'd that work out for you?
that's right.
So, and then the other thing is something that we in this committee and Vermont generally have taken up the issue of when farming, it's the last surviving generation wanting to continue farming, there's still, you raised and educated children. Was there any consideration of transitioning even a small homestead for any of the children, or they were off in a bigger world or different world?
They went off in a different direction. There's nothing, yeah, I'm just as proud of them as can be.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it, and it's tough now, I hate to say this, but yeah, your young men or the daughters are growing. You got to make damn sure that the individual you're going to marry is going to like what the routine is for the farm. It's structure. It's hard. And I don't know how you can improve the hardness because it's just a strain all the time. So,
Thank you for your dedication.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
yep.
Representative O'Brien?
Oh, I was just gonna say, so here's your farm, right?
That's John.
Yes.
Son.
Yeah, that's John Lucas.
And look up in the corner there, you can,
1885.
the 1880
Oh, we
barn.
love that.
And that's, we wanted to preserve that.
Yeah, and Gene wrote a grant. It's what you fellas, once again, helped us to repair it. It's in calendars all over.
And we had, so was John in last week then?
Yeah.
When we were meeting with the board. I remember years ago, you're talking about the beauty there, going to Mountain Pendants and then up to the Battlefield in Hubbardton. I have wonderful memories of that day.
We love it.
Yeah.
And knew nothing about the history really about the battle until I was there and learned quite a bit too.
My question was, are you related, if at all, to the Blue Spruce Audettes?
Yes, cousins.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's farming in the blood there. Yeah.
They've done well. An interesting thing is the barn burnt down. My uncle had been there 4 or 5 years. The barn burnt down. And he jumped right into the next way of farming, not bending down and milking that way and everything else. And they've just exploded. And the boys are Sharpies. There's no doubt about it. And when people drive up and down 22A, you can see what sells milk. Yeah, that's something I think we all have to push. We can't keep coming back asking for more money to help this or that. You've got to help yourselves and maintain your product. So,
And it's a family farm,
yeah.
which is sometimes, I think they have something like 30 employees and I think like 24 are either sons or daughter-in-law or whatever. So that's nice,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you both for joining us this morning. Sharing your story. Who do we have next?
Yes.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody.
We have to leave early.
Okay.
Doctor's appointments.
That's what happens. Take care.
Oh, wait a minute. Coat here?
Oh, you've got.
Yeah, your hat, your coat, I think.
Yes, your coat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Visit us again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Katie Rose Seward, and I'm a first-generation farmer, owner of Headover Fields in Charlotte, Vermont. Over the past 5 years, I have worked tirelessly to build a year-round, primarily direct-to-consumer operation on the Route 7 corridor. Today, I cultivate 5 acres of certified organic vegetables with the help of 2 high tunnels, a caterpillar tunnel, and a greenhouse. Our fully staffed one-stop shop farm stand is open May through November, where in addition to my produce, we buy and sell a variety of third-party farm products from our neighbors throughout Vermont, including meats, cheese, dairy products, beverages, ice cream, jams, preserves, maple syrup, honey, tea, fruit, and so much more. This winter, I launched a new self-serve farm stand in order for our community to access our winter greens and storage vegetables through the cold, dark months. And this has been a great success so far. As we head into our 5th growing season, it's really exciting to be able to feed our community 12 months out of the year. In addition to our robust farm stand operation, you can find me at the Shelburne Farmers Market on Saturdays during the growing season, Or maybe you'll see our name on menus throughout Chittenden County as we have established wholesale accounts with several restaurants and institutions. My husband and I purchased our conserved 76-acre farm in March of 2021, in large part due to funding from Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. We also had the help of Vermont Land Trust, Al, Charlotte Land Trust, and a bargain sale from the previous owners, a non-farming family who kept roughly 16 acres of the original farm, including much of the infrastructure, the farmhouse, the old dairy barn, and a lot of the water resources. Had we not been able to close on the farm when we did in March of 2021, the previous owners planned to reappraise the remaining parcel in June of that year and reevaluate an old plan to put a clustered development of 8 to 10 homes on the land. Given how much land values had already changed since 2020, we can only imagine how things would have been played out differently if the conservation funding did not come through when it did. It is very possible my business would not exist as it does today, or even at all, with the immense financial support provided by VHCB. Farms like mine are not only critical in keeping our treasured Vermont farmland working and protecting our open space, but they also protect the quality of life that Vermonters have come to know and love. For example, our farm was the last remaining contiguous parcel of open land in the Mount Philo viewshed, which is Vermont's most visited state park. Seeing our farm conserved protected a really special part of our state for Vermonters and visitors alike. I am reminded of this every time I stop at the Williston rest stop on I-89 and see the giant photo on the wall taken from the top of Mount Philo, the majority of which is our farm. How different things would look if there were 8 or more 5-acre residential lots sitting on that prime agricultural soil. It's also safe to assume those homes would not have been affordable. So I want to take this opportunity to mention how affordability in Vermont, or lack thereof, is a huge challenge for me and my farm, which inherently operates with high financial risk. Last season, I had 4 full-time employees, and while I am still in the process of hiring for the upcoming season, it is becoming increasingly difficult to do so. In 2022, I was able to hire an experienced seasonal farmer to join my crew at $14 an hour. By 2024, I was paying $17 an hour for inexperienced crew members just to have the help we need to operate. And this doesn't consider the increase in payroll taxes that come with those higher wages. From a business opportunity perspective, I have a lot of interest from out-of-state farmers with great resumes. However, the lack of affordable housing in Vermont makes it hard for businesses like mine to acquire and retain good workers. I should note that as of yesterday, the livable wage calculation for Chittenden County was $25.63, well above the $17 to $19 an hour I expect to pay my employees this season. I simply cannot afford to pay them anymore. Unfortunately, the increase in stress related to Vermont's growing lack of affordability negatively impacts my mental health and quality of life, as well as that of my employees. In closing, I firmly believe that VHCB is a critical player in seeing that farms like mine continue to exist as a critical component of our local economies, our lives, and our identities here in Vermont. Their work is essential in supporting conservation efforts, keeping farmland working and affordable for the next generation. And their work is critical in addressing the affordability crisis, including housing and workforce shortages that continue to deepen every year and threaten businesses and livelihoods like mine. I want to encourage all of you to please support the administration's fiscal year 26 budget for VHCB in full at $36.9 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lipsky.
Katie,
Yes.
hey, we have in a different role at work, serving some of these smaller farm projects, also in Memorial County. But I'm curious if the covenants or conditions associated with your farm with other grants or somehow to be able to construct one farm housing option for farm workers.
I think that there's a possibility of that. Something that was unique about our project was that the previous owners insisted on selling the property to us. And so we had a seat at the table when the conservation deal was done And it doesn't always go like that. Sometimes the land trust will buy it and then do an RFP and pick the farmer to farm the best business proposal to farm the land. That our project was a little bit different. And in doing so, we were able to keep 5 acres unconserved for us to build a home because we were very concerned about building a residence on a property that had an OPAV on it, because our residents wouldn't appreciate and value over time. We just finished building our home and we moved to the farm in December. In doing so, our easement does not include the inherent right to build farm labor housing on the conserved parcel, but that doesn't mean that it's not a possibility in the future. And the one piece of infrastructure that we did get with the building, with the farm, is a 40 by 80 foot shop. That's where our farm stand is. And it will need a new roof. And we think that we will put a dormer on the back and add an apartment if and when we can ever afford to do that. That's our plan, because farm labor housing is obviously something we are going to need to tackle in the future.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, Jim, and you captured it well, Katie Rose. That our easements have a clause, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I'm looking at Don as well, but we added a clause in for additional farm labor. We have to approve ahead of time, so there was no pre-approved farm labor, but the idea that if you need housing specifically for farm help, you can appeal to us and we can try to cite something. I mean, it's a kind of a high bar to get that approval, but it is embedded in the easement because we recognize the inherent issues, with farm labor housing especially. So all of our farm easements have that, or more recent 10 years hence, have that included.
It's certainly forward thinking.
Representative Burt?
Yeah, I guess this is a question to you, Alan, you mentioned that high bar, is your board making adjustments to the needs of the state in terms of housing right now? Is it reflecting that in how you're making decisions on that?
I think it is in VHCB, obviously being the housing partner, which Julie will talk about. But yeah, we've been trying to put in more housing options. But this, what we call the sole discretion, where we have a deciding factor whether we'll allow a house, the landowners really need to show us that this is important to run the farm business. So we don't want to proliferate housing on our conserved farms, believe me. But when it comes to, is this really essentially pretty essential in quotes for your farm business, to have housing for farm labor? Yes, we can get to yes. So.
And we have Rebecca Roman, also for Vermont Land Trust. I serve Chittenden County, Grand Isle County, and a little bit of Lamoille County, mostly stewarding conservation easements. And this past year, I think in the past 2 years, we did do 2 or 3 approvals for this sole discretion house right clause. And those farmers now have farm labor housing on their properties.
And it's important to point out that when that property is sold, you can't subdivide those houses off. They come with the farm. So you're putting, perhaps a dormer on the shop that will always go with the property.
And we try, I'm on the stewardship end, so I'm always engaging with farmers, and I'm in Chittenden County and I'm talking with them a lot about the housing stresses. And as much as we can, we do try to find flexibility in the confines of the conservation easement to support housing. So accessory dwelling units are a really, really big thing that have been taking off, and we've been doing a lot of approvals for those because state legislature says that no town can deny accessory dwelling units on a single family house. And so we try to align the easements ability to approve that as well. Some of our conservation easements have size restrictions, and so you can't cap those because we can't amend the easement. But we do try to do approvals for accessory dwelling units, which can increase housing as well.
Representative Bryan?
I was just wondering if you were gonna hire H2A workers at some point, you would need housing with that, right?
Yes. Yep. It doesn't necessarily have to be on your farm. I know some of our neighbors have local housing for the people they bring up, but it's required that you provide housing if you are getting those workers.
Whether it's through a visa program or otherwise, unless they're people who live nearby already, housing is still going to be an issue. You're going to have to find housing for your employees for the summer.
Yeah. Like I said, affordability is a big concern, and it's easy to imagine how we could find ourselves in a position where we would need to be bringing workers in from elsewhere. And in that scenario, we wouldn't be able to unless we were able to provide them with housing.
Should we move on to Julie, who's going to talk more about housing, I think? Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
I have a bit of a presentation, just want to pull up. Okay. My name is Julie Curtin. I'm the Director of Homeownership at Champlain Housing Trust. I'm going to talk about housing.
This is a presentation that is on our webpage as well.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to talk about the VHCB funded farm worker housing repair and replacement loan programs that Champlain Housing Trust launched in 2022. It's great to be back to this committee and met some of you before, and so it'll be a refresher for those of you who've heard about the program, but there'll be some updates as well. Champlain Housing Trust is located in Northwest Vermont, and we provide affordable housing for the full spectrum of needs, from providing homeless shelters all the way to providing affordable for sale housing. And we also operate a couple of statewide programs in our lending programs, and this is one of them. You can see from the map here that we've done farm worker housing repair projects in almost every county of Vermont, and with the two counties topping the list being Addison County and Franklin County, where there's a lot of farm labor housing need. So this program is truly statewide and involves a lot of partnerships. We've worked together with, in addition to VHCB, Efficiency Vermont to bring, new technologies and making the homes energy efficient. We've also worked with Milk with Dignity Standards Council to identify farms that have needs for improvements for their labor housing. And key partner has been UVM Extension. From the beginning, we have partnered with them to do outreach, both through their migrant education program and their other staff, to make sure that farmers and farm workers who see a need for housing repairs are able to connect with our program. We're largely focused on making health and safety repairs to existing on-farm housing. So having that connection to people who are living and working on the farms has been really critical for identifying projects. Just a little history of how this program came to be. Back in, the legislature's been interested in this issue for some time, and back in April of 2021, VHCB issued a needs assessment and actually commissioned a consultant to survey the housing stock on farms and the farm labor housing needs across the state. That prompted VHCB to issue a request for proposals in the fall of 2021, seeking someone who could administer a statewide loan program that would make loans of up to $30,000 for farms to improve their farm worker housing. CHT and our partner UVM Extension was selected to launch this program. It started in 2022 with $500,000 and immediately was met with many times over the demand for those funds. So VHCB has subsequently awarded funds to the program in 2023 and in the spring and the fall of 2023. In the second round of funding, we also received some pilot funding to do an expansion of the program where the farm labor housing couldn't be repaired. And so we have piloted a few what we call replacement projects where we can't fix up the housing, so we put in a brand new home. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Total VHCB investment to date has been 2.6 million for the repair program and a little over 1.1 million for the replacement program. First, I'll just tell you a little bit about how the repair program works. A farm applicant can get between $3,000 and $30,000 to make improvements to their to the housing. We use it a loan to essentially have some use restrictions that go with the funds so that over time the housing has to be maintained as farm worker housing. But otherwise, we don't charge any interest and there are no payments due. For the repair program loans, we will reduce the principal balance by 10% every year over 10 years. So after 10 years, there's truly no funds due back to us. The one requirement being that it be maintained as farm worker housing. One thing we found fairly early on is that a lot of farms have more than one dwelling unit that they use for their farm labor. And so we were able to expand the program to allow our funds to be used for up to 2 dwelling units. So we can do 2 $30,000 repair loans on a farm. We do a lot of different types of repairs, and this gives you a sense of the scope of the types of things that we might be working on and funding in one of our projects. The way our process works is we have a staff member who, after they receive the application, they'll do a site visit and do an assessment of the full scope of work that needs to be done to make the housing meet the rental code. So we might go in and do a roof repair, see that there's been some water intrusion, and include some bathroom remodeling to address some mold, that kind of thing. To give you a sense of what types of projects we're doing, I thought I would give you a quick case study. This is Lamoille County Dairy one of our early projects. The farm had started to do some work on a very old home to improve it for their workforce and ran out of funds. So they came to us to essentially complete the project. It allowed them to renovate the kitchen and the living room as well as some bathroom and also do some exterior work. And it was a loan of up to our $30,000 max. But really, I think the pictures tell the story. So this is the home from our initial site visit. And in this particular case, there were some workers as well as some family members living in the home. And you can see that the siding's pretty worn and in pretty rough shape. After the project was complete, we were able to replace rotten siding, do fresh paint, and also make some repairs to the porch. Similarly, the inside of the house needed a lot of work. The bathroom had a lot of unfinished areas, as did the kitchen, and we needed to also do some window replacements. So once the project was done, we had much nicer living spaces, cleaner finishes, and very usable. Now just
Representative O'Brien, Julie, it's unclear. So the work you're doing here, whether it's loans or grants with the Champlain Housing Trust, your funding for that comes from a grant from VHCB?
Yes, 100% from VHCB. Yeah.
Is that something then you have to lobby for a certain amount every year in your budget to them?
Yes, we would have apply directly to them for that. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Quickly, this is an example of a replacement project. This farm had 5 workers living in like a 1970s trailer, had a lot of holes in the wall and a lot of, I believe they had pest issues and lost skirting. And there's really no way you can fix up. Actually, hardly any contractors will work on old mobile homes. So they really needed a new home. And in this case, they were willing to put in a ZEM, which is a zero energy modular home. You can't see it on this angle, but they have solar panels on the roof. So this is like 100% net zero, designed with input from Efficiency Vermont. and now houses 5 workers, each with their own bedroom, shared kitchen, and living space. So huge improvement. The workers were so happy to be moving into this, it brought them to tears. So it was a really nice project to see come to fruition. Works a little bit differently in that we can give more funds and still only forgive 30,000, but the remaining remains secured on the farm and would only be repaid if it goes out of farm labor use. We sort of act as development funding, so we give some funds once the building's partly built and then once it's complete. And what we've found is that farms do need a lot of support to be able to manage a development project of this scope. So we've hired a consultant who helps them. In this case, they pulled together funding from their regular credit provider. They also got some ARPA funds through the Agency of Commerce, the CRRP loans, and charitable dollars through the Milk with Dignity Standards Council. So it's a lot of work to pull together that sort of capital stack. And then on top of that, manage a major construction project.
Representative O'Brien.
I just wondered if these examples you're using, are those conserved farms with the land trust or other?
No, this farm is conserved, but the project was on unconserved land. And I'm not sure about the Lamoille County farm. I can ask Al. A lot of these farms are conserved, but it's existing housing, so their easement gives them the ability. Most of the improvements are inside the home. On occasions where we've had septic, we've made sure that we're getting land trust approval before we do those projects.
But just to be clear, Julie, it's not a requirement of your program that it's a conserved property.
No.
right?
No, it's not at all. So we've done a mix. Nice thing about conserved farms is they are familiar with VHCB, so it does, I think, kind of build that connection. So just quickly, the types of homes that we're replacing are the old mobile homes, but also we've done projects where the workers are living in the barn office, or in one case in the milking parlor. So these, again, are situations where it's really stressful for the workers, and there's no amount of repair that could make the housing right. To date, we have done almost 50 repair projects and almost done repair projects on almost 50 farms, but almost 70 projects because a lot of those farms have done 2, because they've needed more than one. Most of the farms using the program, over 60%, are dairy farms, but we are serving a whole range of farm types. We've completed 3 of the replacement projects with another couple that are they're delivered manufactured homes. They're just waiting to get set on the pad. And we've had almost 175 farm workers who are benefiting from improved housing through the program. I would encourage you to, any farms in your district who you think might be interested, I would please encourage you to direct folks to us. We do have funding for more repair projects in particular. And we'd love to work with folks. Looking forward to next year, as others have stated, we appreciate your support for fully funding VHCB, as the governor's budget would include. And from a housing perspective, we certainly would encourage you to go above and beyond. There is such a huge need for housing in the state of Vermont that we will put those additional dollars to work, including through more new homes for farm workers.
Great, thank you, Joe.
I just wonder, so what was your budget for this program last year, for example?
From an operating perspective, or from from a loan?
Granting, I guess, or loan perspective.
Yeah, it was, so the budget for last year was similar to what I said before. It was about the 2.6 million and the 1.2.
Representative Boswell.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so when you said we have funds available to help this, do you mean Champlain Housing Trust or do you mean VHCB or both?
So Champlain Housing Trust has a grant from VHCB that we have availability to draw on that grant to do some additional projects.
All over the state?
Yes, all over the state. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Al, you can jump in on this too, but when we talk about fully funding and the $34.5 million, so jump in and correct me if I go astray here, but statute requires that certain funding collected from the transfer tax and maybe other sources every year goes to the Housing and Conservation Board. And the legislature and the governor historically have not met that obligation. Every legislature has the ability to do whatever it wants. And historically, we have decided, we're going to actually take that money because we have found another use for it. It's taken a priority. Will this be the year where we don't do that? I'm not asking you to answer that question. It's a rhetorical question, but I'm wondering, maybe somebody here knows the answer, whether it's been the case that in recent years, the governor's budget has included the full funding or not, whether the legislature should take the blame or whether it's been blamed to spread around.
I mean, Tracy, who was here last time, could speak to that better, but it's my understanding that the full allocated amount that the property transfer tax says should go to VHB is happening this year, and the governor has gone along with that full amount. So this is unusual. A lot of times the governor has his budget has been under that fully dedicated amount, and the legislature often has bumped it back up. So it's been a back and forth over the years.
And I think if the legislature has bumped it back up, I don't think that's always been the case. I think that often the legislature has been happy to go along and say no. So I think it's a very positive sign that the governor's budget has included full funding.
Yep.
And we will be asked just in the next couple of weeks, along with all the other budget requests that are coming through that affect the jurisdiction of our committee, we'll be asked to weigh in and support this request. We are being asked. That's partly why you're here. And we'll have the opportunity to respond.
And then following up on the chair's discussion here, I'm just wondering how budgeting works when VHCB doesn't know if they'll be fully funded. And then so this program, for example, you're in consultation, I guess, with VHCB as far as how much you'll get a year, because I would assume, given like farm worker housing, you could spend a lot more. You could probably double the program, right, if you had the fund. So is there some point in the year where you're like, our fully requested 2.6 isn't going to happen because VHCB didn't get their full amount from here?
There is that potential. And I should clarify and think about it. The 2.6 has really been over the last couple of fiscal years. So we might actually, for an annual ask, it would probably be a smaller amount. We would need to go back to VHCB for additional funds, and we would gauge that based on sort of what we're seeing in terms of the pipeline and what the need is, and adjust accordingly. We might say, going forward, we think we need to make $50,000 grants because we're seeing projects cost more, and we think we're going to have 15 projects this year, and then we would size the budget that way.
So follow-up question. I know this program is specifically described as being for farm worker housing. I'm wondering, do you also have it available for other types of workforce housing? I have a constituent that does solar installations and was looking at doing farm worker housing. Would something like this be comparable for that as well, or is this strictly for farm purposes?
This program is strict for farm purposes.
Yeah.
We have other programs that help with, and we have, there are a number of sister agencies that build affordable housing across the state. Typically are building affordable housing, so rent restricted housing for income eligible folks. So often we're housing a lot of people in the local workforce.
But not exclusively workforce loans for other businesses or other types of.
We currently have not done that, although there's been a lot of discussion and interest in that. UVM has just built a whole bunch of housing just for their workforce. And we do know of other employers in Northwest Vermont that have a similar interest.
Yeah, I was just going to address your question too, John. as Julie alluded to, how do you anticipate those grants coming through when you don't really know what the VHCB funding is going to be? I mean, we're kind of in the same boat in that we're projecting, we've got a pipeline of projects. We're projecting that, funding to be consistent. Because in our projects and Don as well, our 2025 money is more or less already spent. Our 2026 money is more or less gotten in. I'm looking out to 2027 for that pipeline project. So it takes out a couple of years. So, yep. And the other point is that we're so uncertain because I don't know if you're aware, we talked about this last time with Tracy, is that half of that funding is federal farm bill money. So VHCB money matches that federal farm bill money. And without that, I mean, we don't know. I won't get, we could spend way too much time talking about the federal grants and funding, but that's through the federal farm bill. And we hope that money continues.
And if I may build on that, we did apply this fall, we did apply to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for a $14 million grant to expand the replacement program. And that would allow us to do repair projects on additional 50 farms and 14 new replacement projects. And our proposal there was we should fully fund those projects because what we have seen in the 5 that we're working on now is that, farms are having to put 120 is about a third of the budget. And so farms are having to try to find other sources and they can't carry a lot of extra debt. And so in our proposal, we said we should have these funds fully fund the cost and that would help the farms build the housing. But the prospects I don't know what the prospects are for winning that award. It was an application at a different time.
All right, I think we'll wrap it up there. So just acknowledging that there is uncertainty in the federal landscape in many different places, including yours. So thank you all for coming in. Thank you for making the trip. And,
Thank you.
and we'll be returning to the subject next week, the budget subject, that is.
Is Richard on?
No, Richard,
No.
Richard is not on, and I'm remembering he said that he had an obligation this morning, so he.
I saw in Derby you had a couple of projects, so I was wondering
Yeah.
if you did the Nelson farm. You did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, we've done couple, no problem.
Beer tasting.
So we're gonna move right into a next segment. Julia Richter from JFO is back we just got her for a few minutes to talk a little bit more about the universal school meals. Sure, yeah. No, I think we haven't been at it that long, so I think we can keep going.
We want to presume.
If somebody wouldn't mind getting the door. So, Julia was kind enough to, when I spoke to her last night or late yesterday afternoon, agree to reschedule herself for a few minutes today. And is it just 15 minutes? Is that what you're?
I could say a little bit longer. I have I'm doing the tax workshop on Ed Finance. In case anyone's interested, around noon. So
Okay.
I'll need like at least 10 minutes before that to make my way down and prepare.
And, I don't know whether we'll need you even for that long, but we've had Julia was, I guess, the last witness we had coming in on this topic. And then later today, we have Rosie Kruger from the Agency of Education coming in. But since and I know you both deal with data, but some of the questions that you might be helpful answering, or the JFO might be helpful answering, AOE might not be. So Representative Burt I knew had some questions. I had some questions, and I imagine other committees might too. about so we heard from you, I think, that we know that JFO has an estimate of what the cost of the Universal School Meals Program to the Education Fund is projected to be next year. I think it was 18.5-ish million dollars. But we don't, I think, fully understand is what the cost would be to the state, to families if we didn't have that program. Recognizing that it's hard to pin that down exactly, but if we can at least think directionally and get some like high and low end estimates, that would be helpful. But let me see whether other committee members want to put that more succinctly to Julia.
Yeah. I just have.
Thank you.
Representative Burke.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was looking to get a range of, if we go away from universal school meals, a dollar value on what it will cost the state to not do universal school meals. And I know I'm assuming there's a range because we don't know what each individual school will choose to do.
Mhm.
But if we just had that number to work with, I think it'd help me to visualize that better.
Absolutely. So I'm Julia Richter with the Joint Fiscal Office, for the record. And happy to speak about all of this. I don't have any prepared documents, but everything I'm talking about is I think was touched on in my slides from a couple of days ago, and just like taking a step back, thinking about intuition and thinking about the cost to the state, a range of the cost. So I guess I would start out with reminding the committee that if universal meals were to be repealed, that would be a repeal of the statewide mandate for the provision of universal school meals, which would then go back to pre-universal school meals, pre-pandemic. Would ultimately be up to school districts to decide, as you mentioned, whether they wanted to return to a pricing program or if they wanted to maintain universal school meals. And so in my mind, one of the ways to think about the range is to think about like the two most extreme in a math sense, right? Like the two furthest ends of the range. And then maybe it would fall somewhere in the middle. So on the lowest end would be that every school in the state would return to a pricing program, which would mean that no longer would any school district or would the state education fund be making up the difference between the federal dollars coming for each school meal and what the meals were being charged. So in terms of statewide education fund costs, that would be the lowest end of the range. That being said, there would still be costs borne in the education fund for that return to the pricing program. So the Agency of Education provided me the source that I believe I included in the slides from a couple of days ago of returning to a pricing program as an annual cost estimated by the USDA of somewhere around $100,000. So if every school food authority in the state were to return to a pricing program, then there would be that estimated cost.
That's
Administrative costs.
50 some.
Yeah, so the Agency of Education estimates that would be about 5.4 million in administrative costs returning back to the education fund for the pricing program. That's an AOE estimate. The other piece, which I don't have a dollar amount for you, because it's very challenging to estimate, because A, we don't know what school districts are going to do. But if every school district were to return to a pricing program, the other cost beyond administrative costs that I would flag would be the unpaid meal costs, right? So you have students who are in fifth grade, fourth or fifth grade, who have never paid for a school meal. So in returning to a pricing program, there would be that sense of compliance, whether intentional or just unintentional. So there would be those borne costs of unpaid meals. If the families or the students are not paying those meal costs, they fall to the school district. We know that school district budgets are funded beyond federal dollars, funded, it's all state dollars. So those unpaid meal costs would also fall to the education fund.
So so you're saying that all the meal costs would fall to the state that's not covered by federal dollars, so that some portion of the school budget is covered by each town individually as well, or no, it's all coming from the state? Okay.
Yeah, so this is that nuance of the ed fund that with Act 60 and Act 68, the education fund became a statewide education fund. So all all education taxes are going to the statewide fund. And I do want to note that when I'm talking about these meal costs falling to the state, it's those unpaid meal costs for the return to a pricing program.
So do you have an estimate, real vague guess at what that may be?
I don't. I think Rosie, I know you're hearing from Rosie later this afternoon. I think she would be much better able to speak to that. I know she has looked at in other areas, other states, when there has been a return from the Universal Meals Program to a pricing program, how compliance has shaken out. So I would defer to Rosie on that.
Yeah, okay.
I wonder whether Rosie will have this information at her fingertips, maybe not, but I would imagine that we would be able to look back and see pre-pandemic, in that context, what that number was for, a particular year, recognizing that things are different now, but would just, maybe be helpful. So we'll try to remember to ask her that.
Mm-hmm.
And along those lines, the Medicaid formula, though, is essentially new, right? That the federal government's using, which didn't really exist at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there have been a number of significant policy changes that have happened since the state did not have some version of universal school meals. I mean, the pandemic and changes at other federal and state policy changes, one of which is this Medicaid direct certification pilot program, which allows the state to identify children from economically disadvantaged backgrounds for the purpose of identifying them to draw down those additional federal funds. So that's one of the reasons that we've seen the cost down pretty significantly over the last couple of years.
And that's essentially saying that, and we might imagine, because some of us remember doing this, having to fill out a form every year, turning into the school to see whether our own children qualify for a free meal, and under the federal guidelines. And what you're talking about is now that's the federal government has changed the way that works a little bit, so that every parent doesn't necessarily have to fill out a form.
It's more of an expansion. So that those four, there still is the requirement of filling out forms in certain years, right? So essentially the way that it works is there is a base year, and Rosie and other folks are better to speak to this than I am in terms of all of the nuances. But essentially the way that it works is a certain number of students is identified through Medicaid, through filling out the forms. And then there is either a multiplier applied to that dependent on the percentage of students identified, and that carries forward for a number of years, so that it's not necessary to fill that form out every year.
Has there been any kind of query of schools in terms of what their intentions would be? I mean, I know at one point we heard that there were 70 schools that had universal school meals before the whole state had universal school meals. My guess is that those schools are going to want to go back And my guess is that a lot of them that have it now are gonna want it too, which means it's gonna be the whole state is gonna end up needing to fund those. But do we have any data of like, if universal school meals is repealed, does your district plan to move forward with it or not? Do we know that?
That's an excellent question. I don't know that. That would be a question that I think would be better posed to the folks on the ground, the school district, business managers or superintendents. I don't know.
It feels like somebody statewide should be asking that question comprehensively. I mean, it feels like if with 119 districts or whatever, it's going to be really hard, I think, to divvy it all up. But we kind of, it feels like we would need that number if people were thinking to repeal it to know, are we going to even have a savings or not? Because we might not if a huge majority of the schools would want to keep that anyways.
Yeah, the Agency of Education may be able to provide insight. At Joint Fiscal Office, we don't generally go out to the field and survey all school districts. So
Yeah, somebody else might.
Yeah, my main goal for myself to ask this question, understand more, is really to be able to, because I'm in favor of universal school meals personally. I just want to be able to show like, really, you know, this is the difference in dollar value, and basically it's not enough to, you know, we should be supporting this because it's not going to be that significant. But in the interest of your time, so to get to that number, that I'm just looking for that figure,
Yeah.
to be honest, what based on your best knowledge, what is it going to cost our state to go if what, you know, that range of, you know, what's the least amount the state might end up having to pay if we go this direction, and potentially what's the higher range.
So I can say to you the least amount is somewhere of that agency's estimate of the administrative cost, 5.4 million, plus the estimated unpaid meal costs, which I don't know and I can't estimate right now. The upper range of that would be the 18.5 million of
Decide to opt in.
where they all decide to continue universal school meals, in which case, if the state universal meals mandate is repealed, but every school district decides to maintain universal school meals, we're just changing where in the education fund, the line. And I shouldn't say just, the line is changing. For the overall cost of the education fund, it would be the same. The change would be how tax rates would be impacted. So by repealing universal school meals, it's no longer a categorical aid program, which would mean under current law, it's categorical aid, which means that all property taxpayers across the state are bearing the same share of the universal meals program. If it were to be repealed and every school district were to maintain it, it would still be the same cost, but now it would be fitting into school districts' education spending, which directly impacts a school district's homestead property tax. So what that would mean would be, instead of having the share falling on all property taxpayers across the state uniformly, it would mean that in the districts where it is more costly to operate a universal meals program per student, their homestead taxpayers would see a larger increase in their tax rate than in the districts where it'd be less costly for them to operate a universal meals program.
So I just want.
You've got 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah. I mean, this is important. So I want to make sure that
Very important.
I want to make sure the committee has enough time. So if it means that I show up downstairs a little out of breath, I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
Follow you downstairs too and hear the presentation.
But if in, for instance, my town, the homesteaders actually pay a higher rate of tax, are you implying that they would bear 100% of the, or just at the, whatever the tax rate is set for homestead versus non-homestead?
More the latter. So we have our two classes of property, homestead property and non-homestead property. The non-homestead property tax rate is uniform across the state. It is not influenced by local education spending per weighted pupil. The homestead tax rate is. So if you see an increase in that ed spending per pupil, then the homestead tax rate, all else equal, will also see an increase. But the further nuance there is that the cost is not of every district maintaining a universal meals program is not going to be uniformly distributed across the state, right? Because some school districts will draw down the vast bulk or all of the funds needed for the universal meals program from the feds. Those costs won't need to be borne in the local budget to the same extent than districts that are not able to pull down the same amount of funds, which means those districts that are not pulling down as much federal funding will need to make up a larger share, which will in turn, because of the ed finance math, which I'll get into detail in 15 minutes, will fall more greatly on the homestead tax rate in those districts.
Thank you. Last question. So are the number of federal dollars coming in to support school meals, would that change as well if we go away from universal school meals? Say in the greatest exaggerated situation where none of the schools decide to do universal school.
Yes. Yes.
How would that change?
The Agency of Education estimates that with the repeal of universal school meals, so if schools were to return to that pricing program, 16.9 million in federal funding would no longer come to the state for the universal meals program. There's a couple pieces of the universal school meals statute, or one of the provisions is a requirement for school districts to maximize the federal funds that they're drawing down. So essentially, school districts need to make sure that they are existing in the place of the federal funding to make sure that they're drawing down as much funding as they can, so that the state doesn't make up as big of they're only making up the share necessary, not leaving dollars on the table, so to speak. So moving away from a universal school meals program, there would be students who are currently being identified or currently drawing down federal funds, like for instance, through the community eligibility provision, that no longer would be identified to draw down those federal funds, because to partake in one of these to partake in the drawdown of the federal funds, someone needs to be kicking in the share so that students are getting meals. So by repealing that, those dollars will no longer be coming to the state.
So it's almost a dollar for dollar match right now.
Yeah, that's exactly the way that I was thinking of it. Once I got Julia to explain that 16.9 million, that by having the program right now, we're feeding a large group of students. The state is paying for 18 plus million. The feds are paying for about 17 million, so pretty close. The total of that would all have to be borne by parents, assuming the children continue to be fed at lunch. That cost shifts, and it's not, and it's a federal. So some of it is coming out of property taxes from our, from state taxpayers, but then about half of it coming from the federal government. Did I capture that right?
Yes, I believe so. I would encourage these would be great questions also to ask Rosie. I know I keep punting to her, but she really is the expert. And the other piece that I would also note is when we're talking about meals, we're talking about breakfast and lunch. And I would also add that there's other implications that I haven't gotten into that Rosie could also speak to about other food programs in the state, and eligibility for additional funding that would go away with the repeal of universal meals.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate your.
Oh, absolutely.
And I would encourage the committee to meet you in room 10. somewhere downstairs?
10 or 11, I'm gonna.
Is that a new?
I believe it's supposed to start at 12:10.
We get lunch.
I think you have time to get lunch and come and eat if you are interested. I'll be going to the nuances of Ed Fund, Ed Finance. And if the committee needs anything else from me about universal meals, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Support.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Right, so we do have Rosie coming in at 3 today, be the last thing on our agenda. And I don't know if anyone has other questions right now or thoughts, we can,
I mean, I'm still trying to, just using Stowe as an example, say.
Yeah.
The mandate goes away. From a budget level, it costs the same amount for Stowe's SU to do universal school meals, whether it's a state mandate or, you know, an SU decision or a school food authority decision, right? It's just, I'm just trying to figure out in a budget, you know, whether they get new uniforms or not, or whether they have universal school meals or all that, you know, the Stowe passes its school budget. And then the Ed Fund, you know, is paying for that.
Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on, it's interactive with what other school districts decide. And if they all decided, that was the one extreme, was if all districts, you know, independently said, we're going to continue the program, then the total amount is the same across the education fund. But Julia was saying that the tax impact would not be the same on each district. And I think that I understood her to say that districts with a higher percentage of low-income students than compared to the average would end up faring with a lower tax rate in that scenario than they would otherwise. And on the other hand, the districts with a lower percentage of low-income students would have a slightly higher tax rate. Boy, did I get that right? I mean, that's
And is it per pupil too? Then if Stowe has a higher per pupil because they're doing universal school.
Weighted pupil.
Yeah.
Then you really go down some deep rabbit holes, but it costs more in that case, and it's borne heavier on.
But that relies on the, you know, possibly, I mean, none of us would know and what the districts individually will do. What we do know, and maybe we mentioned this the other day, was that many of us are voting on town meeting day for our school budgets that have already been warned, and they don't include the funding. So next year, sort of the
individual funding, right? Whether if they were gonna go themselves and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that must have happened when the 77 schools had committed to doing it. Those numbers must have been on budgets that were warned and passed,
Yeah,
right?
they were. Yeah, I mean, I know because ours was. All right, well,